what we would do, we kind of learned, just kind of spread out across it, and we could cover an island pretty quick. But we had our goal of that big pile to go to, and we're going up, and Russell 10, 15 feet away from me, we're crawling through, and I see the little yellow kayak over there. And I had been thinking about that yellow kayak all night long.
You want to introduce yourself and tell us your story?
Sure. I am Michael Anglin. I'm usually behind the camera. I have Russell Wagner being behind the camera today since I can't be. And I'll tell you the story of what I experienced after the flood. It really starts even on July 1st. I might get back to that. That was my wife's birthday. But anyway, on July 3rd, we were sitting there just kind of planning what we were going to do July 4th. My brother was going to be doing a brisket. So that was really our main concern for that night, was getting the brisket started. We saw that there was, rain coming in, and the whole time I was sitting there like, man, David, you're going to get wet tonight while you're doing that brisket. And he did. He was up till 3:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I kept checking the weather. We kept getting the rain warnings, flood warnings that we get, and around here it's more like, yay, we're getting rain. It was actually something that we just kind of look forward to, and it's like, man, we're finally getting rain. We're getting what we need. And I kept checking in with my brother while he was doing the brisket that night. I kept texting him like, oh man, you're going to get another wave of rain coming on you. Not thinking of any severity. We do get heavy rains here every once in a while, and streets flood, and you're just kind of used to that. So finally, I think the last time I texted him was probably 3 in the morning, maybe a little bit after 3 in the morning, and I went out like a rock. I mean, I was sleeping probably better than I had in a long time. And I think it was about 4:30, and it was like the lightning was like strobe lights going off. It was so fast. It was just like hundreds of cameras going out. And I remember waking up to that, and my wife was awake. She had been awake pretty much the whole night just from the storms coming through, and checking out the notices we'd get on our phone from the weather app and different stuff. And so we went through that, and she didn't sleep. So I actually fell back to sleep knowing that the brisket had at least been smoked good at that point. And we woke up actually kind of early, probably about 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, and it was still raining like crazy. And my wife, sometime after we had our coffee, I don't remember exactly how much time had gone by, and she actually wasn't looking forward to going to the 4th of July fireworks that night. And I was planning on taking my daughter to go see it because, she likes to see it up close. I like to see it up close. My wife just doesn't really like crowds, so she wasn't really looking forward to going to it. And about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I was like, man, and I just kind of realized, I was like, with this much rain, I hope that stage is okay that's down there, because they put up a big event. It's a huge event for 4th of July here with everybody here. And I was like, man, that stage is going to get washed away, because we do get floods that go through there when that much rain comes through, but nothing like what happened this time. And shortly after I said that, my wife held up her phone to me. We were still just kind of sitting around having coffee and actually enjoying the rain. And she held up her phone, and there was I'm already getting choked up, and I've actually haven't been choked up from this. But it was kind of the start of it. There was a car floating by with its brake on, and it was floating by, and I'm looking at her. I'm like, there's somebody in that car. Like, their headlights aren't on, but the tail lights are on, the brake lights are on. And I'm like, man, they need to get out of that car. And we're still not realizing the severity of the flood. I'm thinking somebody must have gone across a low water crossing it got swept away. And I'm like, man, they've got to get out of the car. That's not gonna end well. And probably the next 30 minutes, she pulled up another video of just water just cranking by. I mean, way faster than any of the normal floods that we get here, where it was clearly bad. And you could see the levels of it. You could see trees leaning over in the videos, and we're sitting there like, man, this is bad. Still not knowing how bad it was. And then there was a realization. I was like, 4th of July, I was like, man, I hope all the campers and RVs, hope they were able to, pull out in time, just for their safety. And at this point, still not realizing how much water was coming through our area. And I don't want to ramble on, but so then she showed there were other videos, and that's when the one video showed up where there was a whole cabin of boys that was floating, going down. You can see their flashlights going in it, and more of these started coming up. And we're like, this is horrible. This is really bad. Nothing we could do about it. We're probably 4 fairly long blocks away from the river, and we start hearing helicopters that day. We start hearing things going back and forth, still not really any word. And it's like, I'm sitting there like, how can I help on this? What can I do? And so I tried to contact some people, and they're like, nope, stay away from the river. There's too much going on. Just stay away. And, by that night, we went ahead and went to my mom's house. My brother had a great brisket made, and we're sitting around. It was very, it wasn't happy at all, but we still did not understand how much had happened. And then we start getting reports of people that are missing, and I actually thought I was past this part. Start seeing people that families that that are missing, and you're sitting there praying for them like, surely they got out. There was John Burgess and his family that I'm related to through a stepmom. They're basically he's basically my step cousin, I guess is how it would be. And you see that come up, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't know John that well, but I know his parents. They did a lot for my dad. But you see that, and you're like, oh, I bet he got out in time. I'm sure he got out in time. And then you're like, then you find out that his daughter was at a camp. So we're praying for his daughter, because we're realizing how many people were on the river, how many people the camps were completely full. And we were praying for their daughter, and praying for everybody's families that were along there and in the camps. Our main concern went to all the kids in the camps. Just because you start hearing evacuations happening, you still don't, you're just hoping for the best, praying for the best. And so my concern wasn't even for John and his family or any of the other RVers. I'm like, surely they got out. And then, we get another missing person that was Clayton Meadows, that actually I just met him just a few weeks earlier, that working at Vacation Bible School for our church. And we actually talked most of that week. Great guy. I actually got to know him pretty good for that week. And, you see that he's missing, and you're just like, oh, surely they got out, and your brain just can't process that it's not how you're hoping that it is. And so by that night, I'm sitting there just really like a caged animal. Like, I can't just sit here. Saturday came across, and I'm trying to contact people, and it's still, no, we got too many people. There's too many people here, too many people there. And I understand that it's hard to manage a lot of people coming in, and I just can't sit still. And you're hearing the helicopters, you're hearing sirens going off and emergency vehicles. And so I basically posted online. I was like, does anybody know any way that we can help? and I'm even like, I have a drone, I can do this, which, you don't fly in those situations, but if you're part of a crew, you can help out that way. And somebody had posted that they needed help somewhere in Hunt. They were needing more construction type stuff and tear down and different things like that. And I was like, well, let me contact some people that I know at church. And luckily I ran into Russell, and he was like, yeah, and he had already been out doing some of the stuff. And he was like, yeah, let me find out what we're going to do, and I'll get back with you. And sure enough, he texted me and he said, hey, we're heading to Center Point. There's a person's property that has allowed us to go look on it, and nobody's been on it yet. So our plan was to do that. Gordon from our church wanted to join in. My little brother was joining in. Russell was going to meet us down there. He gave us the pin drop to be able to go to. And then we started getting the warnings of a lot of rainfall again. The water was supposed to go back up 6 to 10 feet. And, they're being very precautious. So Russell actually had to head back to Hunt because his family was there and they didn't have any way to contact him. So he had headed back there. Gordon met us at one of the gas stations there. My little brother met us there, or drove with me. We went down and met up with Russell's friend, and we actually had to not go to the area that we were planning on going to because everybody was getting evacuated because the floodwaters were supposed to be coming up again. And so we went to an area further down, and I think, like Russell had said, it kind of, I think God kind of gives us a way of softening the blow of what's about to come up. And man, I really thought I was past the choking up part. But so we went and searched an area, and the landowner had driven by, and he was like, yeah, y'all can go and search. They've already searched this direction, but nobody's gone up that way. So we went through looking at stuff, and it was overwhelming. It was a lot. I mean, and this was way further downriver past Center Point. And, you could see up in the trees, you could go through stuff. And yeah, it kind of gets you prepared for what's coming up. And we even climbed up on a ledge that we were at least 30 feet off the water, still looking up on the other side, 10, 15 feet above us. And there was debris up in the trees, so it was definitely higher than 30 feet. And I know some areas got squished down and the water goes up as it goes through some of the channels. But anyway, Russell that night had texted me and said, hey, if we meet 6:45 in the morning, we're going to park one area and then we're going to all ride together so we're not using up all the parking spaces. Go to the Ingram Fire Department. We're going to check in there and see where we can help. And I was like, man, I'm in, because I couldn't just sit there. So we got there 6:30, 6:45, met up with Russell, and man, there were a lot of people. There was Jose there. I don't remember who all, there was a lot of people. Some people I kind of knew from church, some people that I kind of just knew from town. And we all kind of loaded up in a couple of vehicles, drove down, went over to the Ingram Fire Department. They ran us through some of the things to watch for, to be aware of, basically kind of giving us some notice on certain things. And I think it was Diana, that's the chief there, was speaking and gave us a pretty good rundown about it. And she definitely had her part under control. So we loaded up in the truck, and several people got in Russell's truck and got all the equipment that we thought we would need, and drove down, just down from Howdy's, made sure we were parked out of the way, and just kind of stayed together as a group, started going through stuff. And we got down into the mud areas, and it was crazy. You're seeing huge trees that are just pulled over, broken. There were RVs what was left of some RVs that were just completely wrapped. The metal frames are just completely wrapped around trees and twisted like like a twist tie on a sandwich bag. And you're going through stuff, and there's I came around a corner, and there was a Texas flag that had gotten snagged on one of the trees, and I just kind of pulled it out like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take one picture. So I took the one picture of that Texas flag just because it really kind of summed up what I felt we were getting into at that point. And so we start going around, and not many of us knew exactly what we were doing. We're just looking for stuff. I had like a sharpshooter shovel. You know, you could kind of poke around in things, and there's certain things that you come up to, and you just can't do anything about it. I mean, it's too much. You can kind of look through things. There was an RV that I was looking through, and there was mud filled up inside of it. It was all blown apart, upside down. There were cars everywhere that were filled up on the inside. The side windows were gone. Most of them still had their front and back window, but they were still filled up with silt all the way up. There was debris on the ground that, you know, normally when you find something in a river, it's covered in moss, dirt, but you're finding things that perfectly new, brand new things that you find that my kids run around the house. Where's the cube to charge my iPhone with? And they were everywhere, brand new, sitting there. Looked like you just pick it up, plug it in, and use it. There were cords that were still in the wrapper. There were bags of food, you know, snack food, everything. There was a thing of logs that was still wrapped up in the saran wrap, like they were going to have a campfire that night. But it was just crazy seeing all this stuff around. There were teddy bears. A lot of times I would just grab something, kind of hold on to it for a second, and then I would just put it up on whatever the tallest pile was, just because somebody needed to find it. There were so many personal items, we couldn't collect them all. We would keep a few, put them in a bag so we could take to the fire department when we were done. There were so many stuffed animals. And a lot of times you're looking through stuff, you see stuffed animals, dolls, different things like that. And, you know, it's kind of shocking. You know, it takes you back. If you have kids, you're like, oh, those were very personal items. But there were just so many, you just couldn't keep them. And I was actually happy to find out several days later that my wife had said, oh, there's a lady that's collecting, or there's a person or a group that's collecting these animals, fixing them up and trying to get them back to their families, you know. And and it's the things like that these people are doing, going out of their way to try to get some sort of Yep, this is hard. So if you ever need to tell your story, tell it to someone, because I think each time you go through this, it does help a little bit. I haven't thought I was past getting on these locked up parts, but I'm not. But it's all these people that are doing everything they can to help in any way that they can. Our crew kept going down through. We were climbing through a bunch of different stuff, trying to get to these areas that were just kind of too hard to get to. There was the Cajun Navy was there. They had this really cool airboat that they were getting people across to some of the islands, some of the areas that you couldn't get to without going through a lot of water. So they were doing their part, but you could only get so many people and so many things across at that time. And we ended up going past several areas, and there's several times that you could just tell there was a heaviness in that area. I mean, just heaviness, like it just starts pulling at you. And you're kind of looking at some of these piles, and we're doing our best to undo whatever we could do by hand. At that point, there were some skid steers coming in, loaders, excavators coming through. That area was pretty well covered. And along with people, several people trying to go through the same piles and just at least get to the point where you could see under stuff. Then we ended up going past this one area that it's just clear in my mind. And it was just very heavy. And I know Russell was there. I think Jose was there at that point. I don't remember who all was actually with us at that point, but we started kind of going through it, and you get to a point and you're using all your senses. You're using your sight, you're using your smell a lot, even hearing. It was actually kind of odd because I noticed really the first 2 days there wasn't anything moving. There wasn't like lizards. There wasn't anything like that you normally see in any kind of a pile outdoors. Bugs weren't even there. You could find a couple of ants every once in a while, but I just noticed there weren't flies. There weren't anything. It was just completely vacated of life. And so we were kind of going through this pile, and we realized, I remember kind of having a scent, and we're like, well, there's definitely something in there, but the trees were so big, it was all wrapped around, and there was just nothing we could do. And so we crossed over to over a concrete drainage area. We crossed over it, got over that way, went to the backside, kind of explored in that area, went back across the dill, and we came over, and we were standing up on a ledge not too far from that pile. And about that time, you see, I think it was even FBI, game warden, all these different units are running to this area. They start bringing in fire department crews and stretchers and stuff like that. And there was clearly somebody that was found in the area that we had walked by. And you're kind of sitting there thinking, man, we should have dug more, but there's only so much you can do. And so anyway, we walked back. We didn't even realize there was all sorts of refreshments, drinks, food behind us. So we go over there and we just kind of chill out for a little bit. We were already probably, 3 hours into all this, maybe 4 hours into it. So we were still fairly new at doing all this. Russell had a couple days ahead of us, and we got refilled on drinks. Tried to eat a few things, even though you really weren't in the mood to eat. You kind of knew you needed it. But one of the fire department people had come up after they had cleared the one victim, and they said that it was a lady that was in her possible 30s-ish, and I thought back to John's family and knew his wife was about that age. I did not know Julia. I'm sure I met her at one of the family gatherings that we've had at his parents' house. But it went through my mind and just kind of stuck in my head. And I think I even told Russell, I was like, man, I wonder if that could have been John's wife, and you just don't know. And I guess there's no real way for me to find that out. So anyway, we go down, we kind of cluster back together. We end up with some of our original group together. And about that time, nobody's able to get across to the land across. And that's when Russell's friend Daniel he's like, man, I can get us across. And so Russell and Daniel are both making phone calls and stuff like that. And they come back and they tell one of the officers or agents that's there, and they're like, yeah, we got it cleared. And so we realized we were kind of just in a huge group of people trying to help out, an enormous amount of people on that side. And so we're like, let's go across. So we did. We got the okay to do it, loaded up the truck. A bunch of people jumped in with us. I think 1 or 2 vehicles were following us. Luckily, Russell and Daniel knew how to get across there. I'm not really familiar with Ingram and that side of it, but we took a couple back roads. They knew exactly where to go, and we got there. So we show up, nobody's out there. We drive down and we're looking and we're like, man, that's a big pile. That's a big pile. That's a big pile. So we just kept driving back upriver until I think we were right across from where we were earlier, but on the other side of the river. And we just start going through stuff. All we have is hand tools. What we had on, I think we had one chainsaw. I had a little battery powered chainsaw, which, actually ended up never even using. And so we start going through piles, and, we walk down, and there's this one, what we thought at the time was a huge pile, about 18 feet tall, 50 yards long, 20, 30 yards deep. And we kind of circle around. I think Russell and the other guys walked back up it. Me and one other guy was still there, kind of looped around it. There were some signs you could kind of make. There were some smells, stuff like that. You get on top of it. There was a Adirondack chair that was just sitting on top of it, like somebody placed it there. You know, you could see all sorts of stuff. It actually looked like a cabin had kind of come through and either hit the trees and just disintegrated, because you could see all the parts of it, all the wood, a lot of nails sticking up. So you had to be careful climbing over stuff. There was, cups from certain camps, t-shirts, different things like that. A lot of personal items. And again, food items that were completely in the package, not even used. And so we ended up by hand trying to disassemble that pile and getting nowhere, using a handsaw, using hose, using shovels, anything we could just to pry stuff off. And man, coming over from the west, little excavator coming up, and somebody driving down in a mule or a vehicle like that. And it was Joy Molina, who I interviewed earlier, and one of her relatives or somebody that she knew, an excavator. He came in, he's like, "Where do I go to work?" Boom. He was tearing that apart, people watching, making sure of what's being grabbed. And you get an excavator like that in, and then there was a loader that came in, a small loader, and them two working together, and they were able to do 1,000 times what we were able to do in minutes, what we spent hour or longer on, so they were tearing apart, going through. And so anyway, it kind of gave us, we while they were doing that, we went searching all the other areas around. You find deer, you find things like that. We come back to the pile. They found a dead armadillo, I think was the main culprit of the scent that we were going through. And so I think we closed out that day, probably spent 13 hours plus on that day. Went back to the fire department and checked out. Came back the next morning, started all over again, but we went ahead and went to the other side of the river. And early that morning when we were checking at the fire department, we see Don Duran there. And we're like, "Hey, what's going on?" So he said hi to us and he asked what we were doing. And we said, we're going back across the river because that's where we left off yesterday. And he said, "I'll join you over there." So we got in the truck, went back across, went back through that pile and drove up a little bit more north to an area. And we spent probably, 2 hours again. Luckily, we caught an excavator and a loader that came through, cleared it out, and everything needed to be gone through. I think we ended up finding a turtle. I think that day we ended up rescuing several turtles. They were under the piles. You get them out, they're free. I don't know that they would have survived without being rescued, but we did rescue a lot of turtles. We found, I think, another carp or something like that. We found tennis shoes with their names in it. I can actually still clearly remember the name. We'd put those in like an evidence bag or a personal belongings bag that we would take back up to the fire department. And by that point, they already had a lot of people working on the pile that we had started on. So it was actually good to see it being cleared out, just for your own mind, just being clear, knowing that everything went through. So we're going to head a little more downriver. And so we all got in the truck and got to some areas that you couldn't get through. And I think one of the gates couldn't be opened. So we managed to, the bulldozer in front of us managed to get us through. And instead of just cutting the lock to the gate, and Russell was even like, "Man, I got a bolt cutter," but he already kind of made his way through, and we ended up at that, I think what ended up being later called the mega pile. And it was at least like a 2-story building and huge. It was 2 stories high and thick. It was probably taller than the roof on a 2-story building. We got there and it was just like, the previous pile looked like nothing compared to this. And I think the people that were there had already found one victim that was on, that they had found. And so I went there and I just climbed up to the top of it. I just got to get kind of a feeling of this, a view of it. And Russell came up there with me, and there was an area that was down there that was highly suspect, that a female police officer or sheriff was down at, and there were clear signs, and there was no way we were going to be able to get to it. You look at this pile, and we had our rakes, shovels. There was nothing we could do on this. So they marked off an area down there. The cadaver dogs hadn't come through. There was a guy down there, and one of the things that was crazy about this, you're working with these crews, with chainsaw crews, heavy equipment crews and stuff like that. Normally there's a little bit of ego involved. There's a little bit of, there was none of that there. Everybody was like, how do I help? What can I do to help next? If there was somebody in charge, they just did what needed to be done. If there wasn't anybody charged, somebody took charge. I know the first day, a lot of people were coming up to Russell, and I was like, Russell, man, you're in charge of this. You're in charge of this. And by the next day, on Tuesday, we had moved on, and that's when we were at the bigger deal. And we all kind of met down again, a bunch of us together. There was a guy named Derek that had come from out of town to help. Stan that came down to help, who I'd called Sam the entire day. Didn't realize his name was Stan until the next day or later that day. So anyway, we realized what our crew was actually going to be better at, because without excavators and equipment under our own control, there wasn't anything we could do that pile. We kind of searched around the backside of it. Stan was like a badger, man. He was going down through stuff, and he had kind of done that on the previous pile, going in and out of stuff, and areas that I probably wouldn't have gone, and he was going after it. So we kind of got back, realizing there was nothing we could do that deal, and we're like, there's an area over here. It's kind of like an island. It was completely contained by water from both sides. This side was fast rushing water still. There was no chance that we were going to go across that with any reasonable, nobody reasonable was going to go across that with gear and stuff. And so we all kind of got together. There was Colton, Dalton. By this time, Dawn and Laura had joined with our crew. So we ended up with this bigger crew, and I don't remember all the other people that were there, but anyway, we got the stuff we needed, waded across the water, probably a little bit waist deep, went over, did the whole island on that, went up and down it, found what we needed to find. No people on that. We did find a dog that had passed away. And so anyway, by the end of the day, we kind of had a general idea of what needed to be done. Actually had all the contacts we needed. We had contacts for equipment, for chainsaw crews, for the cadaver dogs. And I think everybody was pretty well worn out by that point. And we're like, we need to take Wednesday off, kind of regroup. People had things they needed to get done for their regular jobs. And so we did that. We were going to take Wednesday off. And sitting at home, you can hear the heavy equipment backing up. You can hear the helicopters going back and forth. And it's really hard not to be part of it. And kind of got that caged feeling again, that caged animal feeling, just sitting at home. And I was like, okay, I need to run to a client, drop some stuff off, and I need to run to the bank. And I'm just going to go look around a little bit. And so did some errands, stopped at the bank, and at the drive-through, I'm sitting there looking past Francisco Lemos Bridge, and it looked like some of it had gone through. You could tell they had taken the dogs through there. And I'm just sitting there staring, take care of my business at the bank. I drive down, there's a police officer sitting there blocking the entrance, and I just pull over. I'm like, I'm gonna find the police officer and talk to her. I couldn't find her. So I walked over across the bridge into the field, and I had asked if anybody saw the police officer, and I walked up to this one guy, and ended up being the landowner, Vinny. And I said, hey, we have a crew. We can get as much as we need to. We might be able to bring in something over here. And he goes, yeah, just do it. And he was more than happy to help in any way that he could. And I asked if he had seen the police officer, and he said, yeah, I think she was up over that way looking. So I walked back towards the vehicle, and she was walking back up. She was trying to look down just to kind of see however she could help. And I told her, I was like, we have a crew. I think this is a good area that we need to be at tomorrow. We're going to go do some search, recovery, whatever we can do. And so at that point, a lady had walked up behind me. Her name was Krista, and they were looking for family members or loved ones. They had found one of the girls, Ella or Ellie or something like that, near that bridge, and her boyfriend was Aiden. I hope I'm getting these names right. And so they figured he might be somewhere near there. So they were looking for specific people. And she said, I've marked off a spot right over here. And I said, well, I'll go home. I'll change. I'll do some little bit of recon on this and see what we got going. And so anyway, she dropped me the pin, and she was telling me all this stuff. She had all these other places. And I was like, okay, I'm going to run home, change, come back, and I'm going to go through these areas. And it was just crazy because it was the exact people I needed to talk to. Landowner, person that had a area of concern, the police officer. So I went home, got changed, and got back out there probably about 2-3 o'clock that afternoon, and just started walking. And I thought she meant the pin was just right over the fence, but it was about a quarter mile in. I found the area. She had marked it really nice. You could tell that there had been the dogs had gone through, or somebody had at least gone through some of the piles. There were orange X's and check marks on some of the areas. And her problem was they couldn't get to the area because it was about 50, 60 feet of water to cross over to this little island. And I texted Russell and I was like, hey, do we have access to the ropes? And he was like, yeah, we got harnesses, ropes. We can get whatever we need. And I said, we might have to do a line across. I looked up further. I could see a yellow kayak. I go, there's a kayak there that we could possibly use to get equipment across if needed. And I was like, if the water's not, the water wasn't moving at all, but there was definite signs right at this part that she had marked. So walked around a little bit, and I'm like, well, surely there's a way further up, because the water on this side wasn't moving. The other side was still flowing pretty good. So I went up another third of a mile, and I'd actually marked it off on my watch whenever I had gone through. And it was another third of a mile that went up, and I saw an area that was maybe knee deep that we could cross. And by that point, I saw the lights across, which was a common thing. Even Monday and Tuesday, you could kind of tell there was always a cluster of lights, a cluster of people would get together. That's where there would be a victim that they would find. So you knew somebody was going to find some peace at finding their loved one. And so anyway, I'm sitting there across the river. I find that area, and across, I see the cluster of lights. They go down. It takes them, not too long, and they found a victim, took them up. And meanwhile, I'm texting everybody, our crew, and saying, hey, this, and this, we need this. And then once I found that lower crossing, I'm like, we don't need the ropes, bring them just in case. But as I was walking up, I had seen that yellow kayak, and I was like, okay, I can use that as a marker when we're on the island, and we still need to go about 30 to 40 yards to be able to get to the large area of debris that Krista had marked from across the river. And so texted this to everybody. I'm like, okay, let's meet there. And we all decided at 7 a.m. So we kind of had a plan on that. Next morning, we show up at 7 a.m, and maybe just a little bit before that, get all our gear, and we're off. So we hike up the quarter mile. I show them the areas, and we keep going. I think Don had his chainsaw and gear like that with Laura, and Stan was there again. I didn't call him Sam this time. And so anyway, we went up another third of a mile, had to cross across. There was actually a tree that had fallen across, so we were able to crawl across that instead of getting up to our knees in water. I think it had gone down a little bit by then, but it was just easier to cross the tree. And Dawn and Laura start kind of setting up an area so they don't have to carry it the full quarter mile or a third of a mile back to the area we were aiming for. And so we start crawling through it, and you're crawling through trees they're leaned over this way. So you're crawling over the trees. So you're really about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, climbing up a tree backwards across a tree, trying to get through that. And there was just so much brush there that it was really hard to get to. And you could tell there wasn't anybody there prior because there wasn't any footprints. And what we would do, we kind of learned, just kind of spread out across it, and we could cover an island pretty quick. But we had our goal of that big pile to go to, and we're going up, and Russell 10, 15 feet away from me, we're crawling through, and I see the little yellow kayak over there. And I had been thinking about that yellow kayak all night long. It just kept popping in my head. I'm like, okay, we'll do that. Yellow kayak, there's going to be a marker for us, 30, 40 yards. Then we got the place that we're actually aiming for. And so I was going to just book it straight to. I'm like, man, we're almost there. And because it was harder to go this way where the kayak was. And I see a little red sign, and God turned me that direction because I had no plans on going that direction. There was no reason for me to go that way. I turned, crawled through the tree, got over there, and there was the yellow kayak. And really, I kind of walked up to it just because it had been in my mind so much, and just kind of put my hand on it. And then when I and when I looked down, there was a little hand sitting out from it. And man, I really thought I was past this locking up part. There was a little hand sitting there, just kind of hanging out. And first thought in my head, I'm like, is this a doll? Is this a stuffed animal of some sort? Because your brain goes through a lot of stuff all of a sudden. And we're in a little green camo onesie. I can picture it perfect. My brain tends to keep things in snapshots. And so I just kind of knelt down for a second, looked down towards his feet, saw his face, saw his hair, and stood up, and I looked over, and thankfully Russell was probably 10, 15 feet from me, not very far. And I just said, Russell, kind of waved over. I don't remember exactly what I said, and just kind of pointed down, and he was like, did you find somebody? And I said, yep. And he was there instantly, had to crawl through the trees, come over. He was actually, I don't want to go into details, but he was laid in a very peaceful position, as if you had just kind of laid a baby down in the reeds, for the night. I don't know how the kayak made it there, but it wasn't attached to him. It wasn't, it had kind of floated over and obviously just drifted down, which protected him. The sun wasn't hitting him. He was underneath there. And I mean, literally just 3 or 4 feet that way would have been in that deep 50-foot gap of water and would have not been found at that time. But there was that little sense of kind of a sorrow, but at the same time joyful, maybe not the right word, but peaceful, I guess is probably the better word. There's a peace that comes over you knowing that he's going to be returned to his family and loved ones. And this all sounds like a long time, but it was all happening really quick. But Don came up behind me, and Laura and their neighbor, and he came up, and it kind of steadied the situation, I think, really well. A couple things passed there, a little bit of a blur, but I remember had to get my phone. We were instructed 911. Called them, gave them a location. I could not get the coordinates to hit on the pin that I was dropping down. Don did it from his phone. We gave off the numbers, told them the easiest way to get there instead of going the long way, which we took to go there, that they would have to cross through some water. And the police officer, and I don't know if he was fire department or might have been Jason from the fire department, I don't remember. They came down, they were there pretty quick. They walked up and I asked them if they needed anything. They weren't going to need any of our tools. The baby was going to be fairly easy for them to get. And at that point, we still had another area that we needed to go to that was our main mission. And we all checked, made sure they had everything, and they were like, nope, we're good. And I told them, I said, we're going to be down this way about 30, 40 yards. So we walked down that way, got to the point where Don had his chainsaw, threw his chain, went through a couple things. So we were doing a lot of things by hand. We've actually moved a lot of it. We made some phone calls, got some more people there, some other chainsaw crews. They showed up and made short work of that pile. Meanwhile, the baby that we had just found was on my mind. And Don and I were working pretty much alone for a little bit until the crews showed up, and Russell, Stan, and a couple others had walked to keep searching. And I told Don, I was like, I think I know who that is. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, the baby. And I figured he was about 3 years old. I didn't know the exact age. And I said, yeah, I think I know who it is. And I said, I know the family. And so we kind of talked a little bit, kept going to work, and crew showed up, got rid of that pile. And as we were leaving, we walked back over. They had already, this was hours later after we'd cleared out the other part that we were originally going for. And we walked back, and I was getting a little bit shaken up at that point, and Don was there, and I said, Don, could you say another prayer? And so we all kind of gathered around the place that we had found him, and Don said a prayer. I asked him if he could say a prayer, and he did. He said a wonderful prayer. I think that was much needed. We all kind of gathered together. I think that was really good to do. It was easier to leave out because we'd cleared out the area for the people to be able to come in. And as we were leaving, I didn't want to leave this part out. As we were leaving, down comes, I think his name was Mike. They managed to make it to the hardest places. These people that were delivering food, he came down, had boxes of hamburgers, hot dogs, drinks, electrolytes, water. And I was actually very amazed by that these people were trying so hard to be able to help other people out there. They're trying to help. And about that time, the other chainsaw crew, they had come up, and they had their equipment in a yellow kayak, bright yellow kayak, and I realized that was the kayak that was laying on top of the child that we found, and inside of that kayak was the little red sign. And that was the first time I actually got to even read the sign, and it said something about not being luck, it's God, and then some reason I can remember number 20 on the bottom of it. Got a little choked up then, and I told the crew, I was like, I told them, I was like, that's the kayak that was on top of the child that we found, and they didn't mean any disrespect. They took all their equipment out of it. They were actually using it just to get their equipment across the water. And anyway, that was that. And so I don't mean to ramble on about this. So anyway, we ended up finishing up the day. The next day was going through a bunch of other stuff. We covered a lot of areas. We ended up going until, I guess, that Saturday, that Sunday ended up raining like crazy. The waters came up again, and we kind of finished out the following Friday, going probably 6-7 miles worth of stuff, crawling through stuff. But I remembered after getting home after that day that we found the one child, and my aunt had texted me just to see how everything was going, and to see how things were going. And I kind of started telling her the story about it, and she sent me a little deal that was talking about the children and Jesus, and they were with him. And I was really more overwhelmed by how hard everybody was working, and the steps that led our crew to the child that we found. It was clearly God had put the right people in place. There wasn't even a delay. It was like boom, boom, boom. The marker, the series of events, walking, had a destination. We turned from that destination, and there was that child. It was actually very overwhelming. It was definitely God's hand that played a part in that, because it wasn't my plan to go that direction. But really, after all it was said and done, it ended up being to a point where we realized that what we were doing wasn't really going to help us unless we had divers and excavators at that point, because everything else was going to be much harder to get to and beyond what we were going to be capable of. But really, and I didn't mean to go on this long, that if you haven't talked to anybody about this, talk to somebody. It does help. I still thought I was past some parts and got choked up, but it definitely helps. I'm thankful to all the people that have helped on this, all the people that took their time to be able to go help down at the river and do everything, all the supporting crews and everything else. And I know I left a lot of this out, but that's really all I can go through right now. So I just want to thank Russell for running the camera on this and sitting there patiently. So that's really about it. So thank you.